More Southern Hemi swell queued up. I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 21st.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Be sure and like and subscribe. That is, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, hit the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You'll get automatic notifications when the videos are posted, typically on Sunday evenings. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the special thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. PV Sailing, thank you so much. Our Predicament, Jason. Awesome. Thank you again. Longtime contributor. Lake Surfer, Carlos Antonio, and Evolution Moto, another longtime contributor. With that, let's get to work. We start by looking at significant wave heights by, yes, the South Pacific. The North Pacific is pretty much asleep now, so we're focusing all our energy on the South. A little gale here is trying to develop under New Zealand with 26, maybe 27 foot seas aimed off to the northeast. Fetch from another gale falling south at 24 feet, really offering nothing. And that's it for the moment. But before we get into looking to the future, let's look what's happening right now. We're going to look at current conditions by looking at buoys off of California. Starting off of Point Sur. This is just basically off of Monterey Bay, a little bit south of there. Buoy number 157. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy from all the way up at 33.3 second period energy, which there is none, the whole way down to 5 second period energy, which is just pure wind chop. We see a bump of swell here. This is the height in feet of the energy in each period band. So 1 foot at 16 seconds, 1.1 feet at 15.4 seconds. So we see some longer period energy here. Then we also see a big bump of like a 8 or 9 second period, pretty much just wind swell here. And then 5 second period wind swell is basically unrideable. It's just chop. Putting this all together, we see the largest swell, primary swell, 6.7 feet at 9 seconds from 315 degrees. Theoretically, that could be head high to maybe a foot overhead. Yeah, maybe the surface, something like that. Then we see the secondary swell, 2.5 feet at 13.3 seconds. Says from 284 degrees, but the energy spectrum gets confused here. This is probably more like from 200 degrees. That's our southern hemi swell that's still lingering in there. And the chop height, 3 feet. So there's a bunch of chop in the water right now, not unexpected. Then we go down to Southern California, the Point Loma South Buoy, number 191. Same profile. Clearly we see the Southern Hemi swell here in the 16 to 17 second period range, and then much less wind swell because the Channel Islands are blocking that. Put this all together, primary swell 2.3 feet at 16.6 seconds from 200 degrees. That puts surf at 3.8 feet, and that's without any bathymetric enhancement, so top spots could be 1.5 times that, in the head-high range sort of thing, which it is at top spots. And then some secondary swell. This is actually Southern Hemi swell, a previous Southern Hemi swell, 1.6 feet at 12.8 seconds from 209 degrees, and that's only 2 foot surf. That's pretty much lost underneath the somewhat larger, stronger Southern Hemi swell. And then, in keeping with the theme of Southern Hemi swell, we go look at Hawaii, but we're looking at the South Shore, and we're using the Lanai buoy. This buoy's actually back up. It had been down for pretty much all of winter, number 239. Lanai is pretty good. This buoy is protected from any, northwest wind swell wraparound. You can use the Barber's Point buoy, but a lot of time that buoy gets polluted by northwest wind swell wrapping around. So here we see just this small bump of 14, 15 second period energy and some wind swell in the mix. Primary swell 1 feet at 15.4 seconds from 200 degrees. That makes surf at about 1.6 feet. But again, the bathymetric enhancement thing, there's waist-high waves or so at top spots. And then some secondary swell, 1.1 feet at 12 seconds from 258. Not sure. That is probably not particularly believable. So we're going to go back in time to Thursday, the 18th of April, so just a couple of days ago. Little gale developed here. You see it we get into Friday. Seas picked up. That's New Zealand there. So southeast New Zealand, almost the gale moving towards the central South Pacific. Seas got up to 37.6 feet right there at 60.25 south. 60.25 and about 160 west, 161. Max winds 53.4 knots at effectively that same position. So right there, that's good for some swell production. We'll put this back into motion. But that gale pushed east, if not southeast, quickly faded. You really want your gales and your fetch pushing off to the northeast rather than southeast. So this is good for maybe some sideband energy for the U.S. West Coast. And certainly down into Chile and Peru and Central America, more so than California. After that, things kind of faded out, and here we are currently, little gale trying to get organized under New Zealand with 26, maybe 27-foot seas aimed off to the northeast, but at this point pretty much shadowed by New Zealand. But before we get into all that, we start by looking for what's to come in the future. First, by examining what's happening in the upper atmosphere, jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough. That would be a push in the jet to the north, just like right there. You can see, and that would help create a clockwise flow. Remember, we're in the southern hemisphere now. Southern hemisphere rotates opposite from the northern hemisphere. Yeah, so clockwise flow is the hallmark of low pressure, right? And that happens in the upper atmosphere. It also starts circulating down at the ocean surface. And of course, you have to have fetch winds. They get traction on the ocean surface, generate seas, and impart energy to the ocean. Those seas eventually migrate or radiate away from the fetch area. The shorter period elements, the weaker period elements of those seas die off, exposing longer period swell. Of course, swell when it hits your beach somewhere up here creates surf. So we have a little trough here south of New Zealand. We saw that. We know there's like 27-foot seas here. But now the jet, here's the southern branch of the jet right here. This is the northern branch of the jet up here. It is split. In between, you get pockets of high pressure. But we really see the jet, the influential southern part of the jet is what really matters. And what you really want is the north and the south part of the jet to combine, and when that happens you get more wind and better odds for gale development and troughs and that sort of thing. So you see the jet falling south here. The ice line, I think it's down around 68 or something like that south. So the jet literally starts pushing over ice. Probably not great for storm production. So this is the only area as of right now. Put this into motion. The trough starts pushing east Sunday night into Monday and starts pinching off. It's just, there's a little bit of energy here, but not a whole lot. Probably no real good support for gale development. Notice the jet falling south right into Antarctica proper as we get into Tuesday. But another trough, in fact, let's go back here just a little bit. Another trough on, let's say, early Tuesday morning starts developing under New Zealand. It too quickly pinches off. You don't have enough room to get a good circulation going between here and here. And that probably won't be great for gale development. But then as we get into like Wednesday, little pocket opens up, so maybe there's hope. But notice this big ridge. It's the opposite of a trough. It's pushing south, supporting a counterclockwise flow there. That is high pressure, and that does nothing for swell production in the southern hemi. And then we get into Friday the 26th, maybe another trough tries to push under New Zealand, but then it too starts taking aim more to the southeast, and then that is pretty much what's the effect of the upper level flow down at the surface. This is surface level pressure and surface winds right here. Well, we have a little gale with 40-knot winds pushing under New Zealand, not unexpected. We know there's 27-foot seas there. We also have this other fetch of 35 to 40-knot winds, but they're all aimed at Antarctica. Another little fetch here of 35 to 40-knot winds. We really want 45-knot winds and over a pretty solid area. So the trough here off New Zealand, by Monday, it's pretty much gone. I mean, there is some circulation there, but not a whole lot. Another system pushes under New Zealand on Tuesday, but only 30 to 35 knot winds. Notice all this fetch here falling south. As we get into Wednesday, another trough starts building, or a gale starts building in the trough here over the south central Pacific with 35-knot winds aimed well to the north, building to 40 knots. So there is some potential here. Some more solid fetch even midday Thursday. So there is some opportunity here, maybe aimed at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Then we get into Friday, another trough and fetch, tiny area, 45-knot winds, pushes under New Zealand, but pretty much just gets choked off. And after that, we're just looking for anything solid that has some size to it, and we're just not really seeing it. A steady pattern, but not a strong pattern. Next up, significant wave heights. What's the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, there's our 27-foot seas today. You see it impact the islands south of New Zealand here, kind of get shattered, and it just never really recovers. 20-foot seas, that's only like a 13-second period. That isn't going to last the 5,000 to 6,000 nautical mile journey up into Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast, so no hope there. Another fetch here, let's go back, producing 27-foot seas, but this is all aimed due off to the east. Nothing really of any interest going to radiate north, so no hope there. We're into Tuesday the 23rd, gale with 29-foot seas, but that's falling south. And then we continue. Now there is this system on Thursday, a trough here with 24, 25-foot seas building to 26 feet for a minute aimed north. So maybe that's good for a little pulse of 15-second period energy pushing north. So that'd be arrival time in Hawaii about a week later. So Friday, what is that? The first part of May, perhaps. And then after that, just it's trying, but just nothing really gets organized. No even solid, not much less a barn buster storm. So kind of a weaker pattern setting up. And then looking north, yes, there was this 19-foot seas was up to 20 and even 22-foot seas 12 hours ago, but just nothing really organized. Of more interest, as we get into Monday night and Tuesday, this gale is forecast up here in the Bering Sea with fetch aimed south. Was at 24-foot seas? I think we get a little bit higher. 26-foot seas. Targeting Hawaii, maybe some small swell to result for the Hawaiian Islands on Friday, north exposed breaks, and maybe dribbles for the U.S. West Coast. But that quickly fades out as we get into Tuesday, and that's the end of that. We'll roll this through, but you can pretty much see the North Pacific is going to sleep. The South Pacific is the main attraction now. And then this time of year, we're always looking for wind swell to fill in the gaps between southern Hemi swells. So here is California. That'd be Point Conception there, Southern California down there, San Francisco Bay Area. Hawaii right here, high pressure north, driving trades at 15 knots over the Hawaiian Islands. Maybe small easterly wind swell. We do have this fetch of 30-knot winds off of the California-Oregon border, trying to get some traction. Wind swell is up for the moment along California, but as we get into, well, even by Monday, let's go back, even by Monday you see this gap along the coast, so maybe some wind swell, but local winds not too bad. So we get into Tuesday, the wind swell, 20-knot winds, that's good for, I don't know, maybe 9-second period wind swell. Local low pressure here right off San Francisco, pushing south winds up along the coast. Trades at 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands, maybe more easterly wind swell. By Wednesday, no hope for wind swell for California. Trades at 15-20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. That's wind swell on east-facing shores. A little bit of a low starts developing Thursday, the 25th of April, off the Pacific Northwest, producing onshore winds at 20 knots. But really not doing anything. High pressure starting to really take control. Trades over a building fetch area pushing into the Hawaiian Islands at 20 knots. That'll make for some wind swell. And then that high pressure starts pushing into California. So we get into later Friday and Saturday. North winds at 20 to 25 knots, but probably just a blown out mess unless you can find some protected break. And this will certainly contribute to some upwelling. Water temperatures cool, but not freezing cold. And seeing how we're practically going into May, we might, I mean, this is pretty typical of El Nino. You don't get the spring upwelling pattern as much because high pressure isn't as strong because El Nino's in play and pressure just generally tends to be lower here. So you don't get as strong or as long lasting a fetch. And water temperatures in the San Francisco Bay Area are, what, 54, 55 degrees maybe? It's cool, but it's not freezing cold. Certainly isn't in the low 50s like last year at this time. All right, as we get in, and then we're into Sunday, a week out, it's pretty much the same, pretty typical springtime pattern. Northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. South of San Francisco, trades lightening up for the Hawaiian Islands. And then a quick look at potential for rain for California here. Here's San Francisco, the California-Oregon border here. We're just going to run through this real quick. It was really interesting. The other day, the models showed this low here building. You see rain forecast into Cape Mendocino area midday Thursday, continuing through the day, and rain and maybe even some snow for the highest peaks from Tahoe northward Thursday night. Then maybe another little shot at it Friday, but this did have rain going the whole way down to Monterey Bay a day or two ago. Now the model has backed off, and I think this is probably even pretty much overhyped at this point in time. But keep your eyes on it. Look at the models. You can sort of judge for yourself how real or not real this is. But given the time of year, any precipitation would be a miracle, and we're not expecting any except up in Cape Mendocino. Quick look at surf height forecast now for, this is just like at a very gross level, but this gives you, it mainly focuses on the wind swell. So you can see there is wind swell in the water Sunday, 4.5 feet, fading as we get into Monday, 3.5 feet, and then down from there. There is southern Hemi swell forecast under all this, hence the title of this video. But you can't see it here, but when you get into the Southern California graph, it becomes much more apparent. And then you see more wind swell coming on Saturday and Sunday a week out. Winds, let's see, oh, these are swell directions. You can see the swell direction. It's interesting. It picks up the southerly swell direction, but not necessarily the height. Let's go look. Here you go. Yeah, see, it's all wind swell. 3 feet, 3.5 feet at 10 seconds. And then you see the little bit of southern Hemi swell poking through at 1 foot at 15 seconds. So we get into later Wednesday. And then Friday, another little pulse, 1.1 feet at 16 to 17 seconds, but the wind swell pretty much dominating. Let's go look at Southern California. Now, this is probably far more representative of the southern Hemi swell situation, given the Channel Islands blocking all the northwest wind swell. Surf heights in the 2.5 foot range up to maybe 3 feet. You can see the pattern here. And this is wind direction, sorry, out of the south. But let's go look at the swell here. Here we go, 1.5 feet at 16 seconds. That's swell. It's actually hitting today, Sunday, and going to build just a little bit on Monday, 1.7 at 15 to 16 seconds. Then fading, then another little pulse, 1.9 feet at 15 to 16 seconds for Wednesday into Thursday, and then that dropping off. And I think there's yet even another one out here, but it's pretty small in size. And we do the same thing here. We're looking at Maui again for the protection from the wind so we can tease out if there's any real waves. You see 1.7 foot, that's southern Hemi swell, but then things kind of fade and we're talking 1.5 to maybe 2 foot surf. Let's go look at swell sizes. Now this isn't picking it up. There you go, 1.2 at 14 to 15 seconds. That was this morning. That kind of gets overridden. There's still some southern Hemi swell lingering in there. You see another little 1.2 at 14 seconds, 1.1 at 13 seconds as we get into Thursday and Friday. But the reality is no solid southern Hemi swell. Just anything that's decently rideable will be from the south. All right, let's go take a look long term and let's see what's going on with the two major weather oscillations that affect surf production and storm production over the long haul. The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the El Nino Southern Oscillation. First, we start with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It is a periodic weather oscillation that goes rotates around the planet from west to east on the equator. There are two phases, the active phase and the inactive phase. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. They rotate west to east around the planet. It is the active phase which is the good phase. It's effectively a low pressure system. When it moves into the West Pacific, because it's low pressure, it starts sucking up warm, moist air from down at the ocean's surface, lifting it aloft. That warm, moist air gets caught by the jet stream. It helps feed energy into the jet stream, building the jet stream, and a stronger jet stream, well, it tends to consolidate, and that digs out the troughs we were talking about earlier, which makes storm, which makes surf. All right, so the inactive phase is like a high pressure system. It basically does the opposite. It cuts energy off from the jet stream. The jet stream splits and it is weak. So we're looking at data from the TAO buoy array. It's a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino, but there are wind sensors on the buoys. These are 5-day average winds. So in the East Pacific, and this is East Pacific, West Pacific, equator there, international dateline right there. We're just looking at the arrows. The stronger and longer the arrow, the stronger the winds. So this looks like moderate east trades over the East Pacific, moderate east trades over the Central Pacific, same thing over the West Pacific. But it's not the actual wind speed, it's the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of the year. We see actual westerly anomalies over the East Pacific here. That would maybe be a sign of the active phase of the MJO. Why? Because the active phase of the MJO because it's a low pressure system, it suppresses trades. Trades are driven by high pressure. So the inactive phase of the MJO, it being a high pressure system, would actually constructively bind with the normal high pressure systems that are over the Pacific, and that in turn would increase the speeds of trades, where the active phase, our good phase, decreases the speed of trades. So if anything, looks like trades are reversed here in the East Pacific. Maybe the active phase of the MJO is here, but then you get over the Central and West Pacific, and it's pretty much business as usual. Let's go look at the forecast. So here's 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. That's fancy words for winds up at about 4,700 feet. But that's a good proxy for what's going on down at the surface. But now this is the whole planet, okay? The date line runs right up the middle. We know where the date line is in the Pacific, about 2/3 of the way across the Pacific to the west. The far West Pacific starts about 125 east, so right here. The all-important area where the active phase of the MJO feeds the jet stream is that area from as soon as it gets into the West Pacific to just a bit east of the date line, so right in this area. Now, the blues are easterly anomalies, roughly synonymous with the inactive phase of the MJO. The reds and oranges, westerly anomalies, roughly synonymous with the active phase of the MJO. So you can see there was a data outage here for about 5 days on this site, but you can see the westerly anomalies were over here in the East Pacific. California is like right here. Now this is down on the equator, so this would be the point on the equator south of California. But now you see just this big blob of blue scheduled for the next, that's 5 days, 7 days, almost 10 days, next week and a half. So one could say inactive phase of the MJO. But then you get to about the 31st or the 30th of April, and then we see westerly anomalies pretty strong, perhaps the active phase of the MJO setting up in the all-important Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific. Here is upper-level outgoing moisture, outgoing long-wave radiation. This is just basically, are there more clouds or less clouds than normal? More clouds are good because that would suggest the active phase of the MJO. Again, that warm, moist air being lifting aloft, hitting colder air aloft and condensing, turning into clouds. So the reds and the oranges here is dry air. The green is wet air. And let's get ourselves oriented here. South America, Central America, New Guinea there. The equator is 0. Dateline roughly there. Kelvin wave generation area right in here. So right now we're seeing dry air, the last of what looks like an inactive phase of the MJO pushing across into about the 1st of May. So that'd be, about another week and a half, something like that. Then you see greens, wet air starting to develop. So the active phase of the MJO making its way across the Pacific. You can see the transition from west to east, pretty much out of the Kelvin wave generation area by the 21st of May. So about a 3 or 4 week transit time here, and then again dry air starting to set up inactive phase for the very end of May. So let's go look at another thing. This is the CFS model. Again, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. This goes out a month. It suggests, oh, and on this chart, the MJO is actually depicted by a black line. The active phase is a solid black line. The inactive phase, a dotted line. The reds are westerly anomalies with the active phase of the MJO. The blues, easterly anomalies. So what you can literally do, now this is past performance, let's get ourselves oriented. The dateline runs, this is the whole planet, so the dateline runs right up the middle. Far east Pacific, or west Pacific is over here about 125 west, and the Kelvin wave generation area ends about 170 west, so here. So looking back in time in January, active phase of the MJO, and again, active phase is what pushes energy in the jet stream, promotes storm production. Then we went through a down spurt for about 3 weeks in later February. March, another weak active phase, followed by a weaker inactive phase late March and early April. Here's where we are today, just sort of a dead neutral pattern. There's those westerly anomalies over the East Pacific, and there's probably our inactive phase pushing across. The peak of it for the next week to maybe week and a half. Then you see down here the signs of another very weak active phase of the MJO, westerly anomalies, in the early part of May, sort of going through till about mid-May, but then easterly anomalies forecast as well. Let's do one more look. Here's the same model, but this goes out 3 months. Past performance is down here, the forecast up here. The reds yellows and oranges are westerly anomalies. So back in December, and the date line runs right up the middle again, whole planet, and far west Pacific right here, 125 east. So you can see active phase in December, another active phase in February, another weak active phase somewhere in March. Here's our current inactive phase, and it is supposed to continue, it looks like, into about April. Then after that, we see westerly anomalies, but very weak. And what is key to notice here is those westerly anomalies over time get pushed further and further to just the very limited to the very far west Pacific by mid-July, with easterly anomalies building and starting to fill more and more of the Pacific. We've talked about this in the past, the development of La Nina. This would be a classic symptom of the development of La Nina. Let's overlay the MJO here just to get ourselves right. Again, solid contour, active phase. You see one in December, another January, another in March. Here's our current inactive phase. It's almost dead. And then a building active phase, supposedly forecast right now, building in the West Pacific, but not really disposed to get into the heart of the Pacific till about through the end of May sort of thing. So we got a couple of weeks. There's our westerly anomalies associated with it. East anomalies continuing for about a week, maybe 9 days. Then westerly anomalies. After that, another weak, very weak inactive phase, and supposedly basically neutral anomalies, and then active phases after that. But notice the easterly anomalies filling everywhere, even west of the dateline, the greater part of the Pacific as we get into June and July. Why is this? Let's overlay the low pass filter. This tells the real tale. The black solid contour is the low pressure bias. One can basically say it just means the atmosphere has a tendency or wants to be favorable to low pressure development. In this case, El Nino. You can see it for December, January, February. We went from 4 contours to 3 to 2. That second contour faded out in early April. Are the last little lingering remnants of the El Nino low pressure bias to be gone by mid-May. Then you see it do this jump. Boom. In fact, a week from now, you see low pressure starting to build. Now, this is effectively over the Indian Ocean and the maritime continent, like Bali in that area. So one would think if you're going to go do surf planning this summer, the Indian Ocean would be the place to go as the low pressure bias builds with 2 contours. And notice this. The dotted contour, high pressure bias, the beginning of La Nina in the Pacific, starting to set up by about June 12th or so. So at this point, I think everyone's well aware that El Nino is dying, La Nina is starting to develop. We can see that evidence of that. In the first place it really manifests itself is down subsurface in the ocean. El Nino is characterized by warm water, which is normally over in the West Pacific, all moving east and building up there. That warm water at the ocean's surface creates evaporation in the East Pacific rather than in the West Pacific, and when it does that, it drags weather with it across the Pacific, normally in the winter months. But now we can look at data from the TAO buoy array and see what's going not at the ocean surface, but subsurface. This is the early indicator of what's going to happen at the ocean surface. So we see there's the 30-degree isotherm, 30 degrees centigrade. That's warm water. It's already way off to the west. It was over somewhere in this area this winter. The 29-degree isotherm, it actually kind of like moved back to like 175 west. Now it's pushing off to the east a little bit. That's probably due to, just different weakening trades, a temporary seasonal adjustment, whatever you want to call it. 28-degree isotherm, I think, was surfacing here at 160 west a week ago. It has backtracked a little bit, a little tiny bit of it showing right there. But in general, you see warm water limited to a very shallow area here in the east and building in the west. Now, it's not the actual water temperatures, again, that matter, the means or the average. It is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. You can see water temperatures 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees below normal over a large area, basically filling from 150 meters down. That's what, 450, 500 feet down in the ocean, the whole way from the west to the east. Last year, this whole area was characterized by warm water being pushed from west to east, driven by the successive strong active phases of the MJO. That has all faded out. Now instead you just have balls of cool water, cold water Kelvin waves, if you will, pushing across. Eventually they're going to start erupting up in here. And you see the last lingering bits. I would say this is not even El Nino warm water, but I guess it is for now. 1 to 2 degrees above normal, but very shallow, hanging on by the skin of its teeth. We look at another version of that chart, but also supplemented with satellite data. It shows actually the cold water much further off to the east, actually erupting at the ocean surface. Now, this is April 13th, so this is older data. Something has changed since then, but it still paints the same picture. Cold in the east, whatever warming there is in the west, pushing off this way. Here's the satellite data. Again, this is also old, April 13th. There was a data outage at NOAA. It was pretty big. A bunch of servers got taken out, and it did affect our wave models for a couple of days, but fortunately that's all back up and running. But anyway, here is Chile, Peru, Ecuador. This is the equator here. That's the date line there. You can see Central America up here, Hawaii's there, and New Guinea there. The takeaway from this chart, minus 15 centimeters. What does that mean? That means the ocean height is lower than normal. What does that mean? Well, if you have cold water at depth, it contracts. The water above it gets displaced down. You'll get a divot on the ocean's surface. Likewise, if you have warm water at depth, it expands and it'll displace water above it up and make a bump. Okay, when you have these are centimeters, minus 15 centimeter anomalies, there's the Galapagos there. This suggests there is much cold water queued up off of Ecuador and the Galapagos, and look at this, minus 15 the whole way out to past the date line. So only cold water, and it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator that matter. What's going on up here and down here really don't contribute anything to the MJO, or they don't contribute much to El Nino. El Nino is all characterized by water temperatures 5 degrees north and south of the equator, and you can see this all just suggests cold water in play. Here's another way of looking at this over time. Upper ocean heat anomalies. This is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific over here. You're literally looking back May a year ago at warm water, Kelvin waves, one pushing across from the West Pacific to the east, another here. This is the development of El Nino. This is how it happens. Another Kelvin wave here, two more here, here, and maybe a third even here. And then it all collapses. This was late January this year, and all of a sudden you see the emergence of cold water in the far West Pacific. That's because every drop of warm water that was in the West Pacific had been transported east off of Ecuador. So you get an upwelling phase over here, and then that cold water starts getting pushed across the Pacific. You see it's just building 1, 2, 3, well, 4 shades. So 1, 2, 3, 1.5 to 2 degree anomalies here below normal. So the beginnings or the fundamentals of La Nina well in flight. Now that's subsurface. What about at the ocean surface? A totally different picture is in play right now. Here is Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, Hawaii out here. And only the equator right here, so 5 degrees north and south of the equator. The yellows are all above normal temperatures. So you see a clear El Nino signal still present at the ocean surface. Doesn't matter what's happening down below. For the moment, warmer than normal temperatures support evaporation, which support an El Nino-like configuration. Hence the not as strong trade winds pushing down, the spring upwelling, not as strong as one would expect considering we're transitioning to La Nina. That's because we're in the hangover of El Nino, and this warm water here is the clear evidence of that. Now, you can clearly see off of Peru and Ecuador, colder than normal temperatures are trying to get to the surface. They are at the surface, but they haven't expanded their coverage yet. But we suspect over the next 2 months, this cold signature is going to start building over this entire area. In fact, let's go look at the trend for the past 7 days. So this is just a 7-day trend, but you see water temperatures cooling along Peru and Ecuador and trying to make their way out some off of past the Galapagos Islands. It was actually much bigger. I think this cool trend extended out to here last week. Now it's collapsing, and you actually see warming all along this area. This is primarily, you saw reversed trades or trades weaker than normal in this area. So all it is the sunlight beating on the ocean, warming it up. As soon as the trades wake up and start blowing, this will all get wiped out, and you'll then see the cold water that's subsurface here being drawn up to the surface to replace the warm water that's moving over in this direction, and the La Nina signature will emerge. Again, here's the backed off view. You see actually much warmer than normal temperatures here. The little cool pool there, I mean, it really doesn't look like much. If you didn't know what was going on subsurface and know that under here there's nothing but massive amounts of cold water, you'd go, hey, we're still in El Nino. But we're not. Also, again, we've talked about this last week. Water temperatures quite warm here in the main development region for hurricanes or developing tropical waves pushing off of Africa. We'll keep our eyes on this as we get into late May and June, but this could forecast or portray a active hurricane season for the U.S. East Coast. Sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 region. This is the area right there where the Galapagos and Ecuador. No big surprise. Temperatures falling since March. And yeah, you have your ups and downs, but the general trend is down. You saw the blues off of Ecuador. This is reflecting that. Now, the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino region, puts temperatures at 815 thousandths of a degree above normal. So still in the weak El Nino category. Actually, temperatures are probably a little bit higher than this. Still in the moderate El Nino temperature trend territory. And you don't see a significant, hard falling drop here, but we think it's only a matter of time. So according to this, we're still in El Nino. Sea surface temperature anomaly trend. This is literally looking at the ocean, East Pacific here. West Pacific here over time. You see the development. This was May of last year, the beginnings of the El Nino warm water eruption off of Ecuador, and its progression into December and January, basically filling the whole East Pacific with warm water. But now you see the emergence of the cool pool off of Ecuador and the demise of these temperatures, and right now 1-2 shades. So that's 0.5 degree to 1 degree, basically filling the whole equatorial Pacific and slowly fading from there. What does the atmosphere think is going on? Well, we can measure the effects of El Nino or La Nina on the atmosphere by looking at the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, which is more or less in the Indian Ocean, and Tahiti, which is in the South Pacific, pretty much just south of the equator. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, this index goes negative, minus 4.33 today, suggesting that pressure is lower in the Pacific than in the Indian Ocean. But you kind of look back, this is the daily index, it's pretty noisy, and the MJO heavily affects this guy. You see we had this bit of a run of negative readings back in March into early April, and for now, it kind of looks like we're not in El Nino or La Nina, just kind of neutral. But we can use the 30-day average here to sort of filter out the noise, minus 5.6 today. It's actually lower today than it was at any time this month. Again, probably, don't know. I mean, it could be as simple as low pressure over Tahiti, localized system. I mean, this guy has been never got as cold or negative as we thought it would. I thought it'd be down at minus 20 or so and holding for months at a time. Never even came close, but for a week or two here and there during this El Nino. 90-day average is your El Nino La Nina indicator, minus 7.45 today. Actually lower than it's been at any point for the past month. Again, still not that negative. El Nino, you should be down at minus 15. We're not there. If anything, I'd say we're recovering from El Nino. Let's look at this on a graph. So here we are, 30-day moving SOI graphed out. Here is back in 2022 during La Nina. We got into January of 2023 and the SOI just started plummeting. There's 0, so we went from La Nina, and these downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO. So just 4 months of active phases of MJO. But then last summer, we got in this perplexing pattern where El Nino just stalled, and boom, there we go. We went back to almost a La Nina-ish, or at least neutral. It tried to recover in, let's see, July, late August, September, but never really even went down as low as it was before. And by October, was already giving up the ghost, suggesting that El Nino had just, for whatever reason, we got into the fall and it lost its mojo over the summer and never recovered, and that was the end of it. It looked so good in the run-up and the early season and then just lost itself. We think some of this was attributable to the PDO. We'll do a video on that at some point in the future. We probably need to do a recap of El Nino too, so we'll do them all at the same time. Today, here we are. Yeah, we're negative. This just looks like the active phase of the MJO influencing the indice, and as we get into time, this guy will start working its way back up again. Sea surface temperature forecast data for the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region right here. This is from the CFS model. This is the unmodified version, just the raw data. This is actuals, what has happened. You see our water temperatures got up to 2. And then as of mid-April, we're down at like 1.9 degrees. Here's the forecast. This is constantly showing us, this model showing us just dropping off a cliff. And then when the actuals come, they keep pushing this forecast off further, with the angle here being a much slower progression. Well, I suspect we're not really going to be, we'll be into June or July before temperatures even reach neutral. The other thing is this model was showing down at minus 2.5 and then 2.1. Now it's showing about minus 1.75 degrees as we get into the fall, which is still definitely strong La Nina, but not as strong as it was. And again, we're in the spring unpredictability barrier, that time from late March into about the 1st of June, where the model just has a real hard time figuring out what's going on. And you saw that even when we were looking before at all the Southern Oscillation Index in January, February, March, April, when all the Kelvin wave activity was happening in the lead up to this El Nino. And then once we finally got in summer, then the true nature of our El Nino got exposed after what looked like just a great run up, and then basically the rug got pulled out from under us and the whole thing stalled and kind of fell apart. So now this is the PDF corrected version. It shows temperatures down at minus 1.4 degrees. So either one of these I still think are a little bit over the top. The Concensus model has posted. Let's go take a look at that. Here is a model, or the output from every known El Nino model. Dynamic models here, and I don't know whether there's 15 of them, and statistic models, maybe another 10 here. Dynamic model average, this is really interesting. It shows temperatures going down to 1.08 degrees in, that'd be October, November, December, but by the time you're into like December, temperatures are already coming up, hovering somewhere in the, it's hard to get the number here, so I'm just going to eyeball it, like 0.65 of a degree. Then these statistic models, where are they? Right here, the greens. They show temperatures, the green right there, I'll just hold it down here so you can see it. They show temperatures only going down to maybe 3/4 of a degree below normal. So notice, between half a degree below and above is considered neutral. The statistic models are showing us barely moving into La Nina, a weak La Nina at best, from half a degree to 1 degree, with the dynamic models a little bit deeper, maybe a moderate La Nina, but then quickly recovering from that. So again, we're in the springtime unpredictability barrier. Here, who really knows? Here, we can look at the actual data. Dynamic models here. Average of the dynamic models down to 0.936 degrees, 0.1. Okay, 1 degree in the October, November, December time frame. And then the statistic models down at 0.927. So, I'm sorry, 0.779. Put it all together, shows an average of almost a degree below normal. So that's still a pretty weak La Nina. One can only hope that this is correct. Again, we're in the springtime unpredictability barrier, so who knows? But at least it's not showing us falling off a cliff, at least not yet. So for right now, small southern Hemi swell is actually hitting, supposed to hang into about Monday, maybe another little undefined pulse on Wednesday, and then maybe even a weaker pulse after that for maybe next weekend, with wind swell in the mix for California. Most of the southern Hemi energy focused on California, not so much for Hawaii, but Hawaii also forecast to get a little pulse of northwest swell from the North Dateline region. Nothing huge, but chest to head high sort of thing, something rideable. Longer term, well, we're still under the effects of El Nino. It has not given up the ghost, which is actually a pretty good thing. Warmer than normal water along the equator. Cold water firmly entrenched subsurface. It will make itself known at some point here, but a little bit of a delayed start. That's a good thing. We don't need to be under La Nina any longer than we need to. The long-term models suggesting a somewhat improved forecast, perhaps weak La Nina. It's hard to say what's going to go on. This would be a good time, if you're a bettor, to place your bet. You can write it up in the comments section down below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. What do you think? Are we going to strong La Nina, weak La Nina, or somewhere in between, or back to El Nino? Your guess is as good as mine at this point. The models suggest probably weak La Nina. I'll take that if it's the way it plans out. But we won't really know for sure till we get into October and November. Other than that, I think that's all we had to say. We're in summertime now. Winter's pretty much over. We're just waiting for a good pulse of the active phase of the MJO to feed the jet stream to help nudge the southern Hemi along. Typically during the year, the summer after El Nino, the area under New Zealand is the main region for storm development, which seems to be the case, but it's not very strong and not really doing as much as one would expect. But we're still pretty early in the season, too. It's mid-April, mid to late April. May is kind of the peak of activity or the run-up to winter, so in the southern Hemi. So we'll see how things play out, but at least there is some swell, and there has been some swell in the water, and it looks like there's more to follow. Summer is here. Hooray! No more wetsuits if you live in the right place. All right, that's our video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you'd like to make a small contribution, you may use the special thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. If you have questions or concerns, write them up down below. We'd be happy to answer. And with that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.